Okay, good morning, everyone. How are you today? I hope you're doing well. You know, we have 2 more weeks of lecture and then your final exam. Wow, the semester will be over. So I know we could all use some rest. So hang in there. I know it's very challenging at this time. So if you can hear me okay, please type yes into the chat window. Okay, thank you very much. Okay, good. All right, gang. So just a few things to update you on here or to remind you about. Remember that we do have our next lab exam this coming Monday. Okay, that exam 3 is on the nervous system word bank that was disseminated a few weeks ago. So I hope you are preparing for that. And you know, by all means, you can send me questions or stick around during virtual office hours, and I can try to help you with certain pieces of anatomy. So that will be a week from today. And 2 weeks from today is Monday, May 11th, and that is when you have your final exam for the course. Okay, so we really are wrapping things up here quickly. And I know even though it's very tiring at this time, it's important that you try to stay as focused as you can. I will be sending out a study guide for your final exam later this afternoon. So by the end of today, you will have your study guide for the final exam. Do you have any questions at this time? Okay. All right. Well, please let me know if something comes up. You can always send me an email or ask during class time on the chat window. Okay, gang. So we are going to do chapter 15 this week. Chapters 15 and 16 are both fairly dense chapters. And so, like most things, I won't be able to get through everything in the chapter during our time together. But through our collective note taking, hopefully you'll get a feel for what kind of content I really want you to focus on. So let's go to the shared Microsoft Word document, and we'll start some notes here from chapter 15. Okay. All right, so at this time, you should see a Microsoft Word file on your screen. And what we're going to do is, put a lot of the content of table 15.1 in your notes as a way to begin to summarize information between the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. Okay, so let's see here. This is going to be a comparison of the somatic and autonomic nervous systems. Okay. And what I'm going to use is actually, I'm going to put in a table in the document. Let's see, I think I need about 8 rows here. And we will use that to put in information. The left-hand column is going to be information on the somatic nervous system. And the right-hand column will be used for the autonomic nervous system. Okay. All right, gang. So let's see if we can make some summary statements to get us get our thinking caps on this morning. All right, both the somatic and autonomic nervous systems belong to the motor division of the peripheral nervous system. So that's the first thing we will say. Okay, the somatic nervous system belongs to the motor division of the PNS, the peripheral nervous system. That is true for both the somatic and the autonomic nervous systems. Okay, so number one is the same thing for both somatic and autonomic nervous systems. Number two, the somatic nervous system, formally speaking, has no subdivisions. It's not divided into smaller components. Okay, so the somatic nervous system has no subdivisions, but the autonomic nervous system does. If you recall from chapter 12, okay, one of the very first things in chapter 12 is a very nice picture that, you know, if you have your book in front of you, you can go back and look at it. It's on page 405, figure 12.1 on page 405, and you can see what I'm talking about. The autonomic nervous system is subdivided into the sympathetic and parasympathetic portions, as well as something called the enteric nervous system. All right, so the autonomic nervous system is subdivided into the sympathetic. Now, when you think sympathetic, right, you have to start getting used to these terms. You need to start memorizing them. You need to start putting some memory triggers in your brain. When you start thinking sympathetic, you should be thinking fight or flight. In other words, it's a very active system where our body gets physically agitated to fight an enemy or a threat, or to run away from that threat. So for sympathetic, think fight or flight. Okay. The second subdivision is the parasympathetic. And for parasympathetic, that's the relaxation portion of the autonomic nervous system. So when you think parasympathetic, you should think rest and digest. So sympathetic is fight or flight. If I could get my word processor to cooperate. Fight or flight, and parasympathetic is rest and digest. Okay. And, okay, so those are two things that I bet you may have heard Jennifer has a question on the chat window. Is that similar to when people with anxiety have panic attacks? If you're asking what I think you're asking, Jennifer, the answer is yes. When folks have panic attacks, they have adrenaline running through their body, and that is part of the sympathetic nervous system response. So yes, that is what's happening. Okay, so I bet you heard of fight or flight, and maybe even rest and digest in a high school health class if you had it in high school. Okay, that would be something commonly talked about. But in addition, the autonomic nervous system is not just the sympathetic and parasympathetic, but it is also the enteric nervous system, okay, which is responsible for coordinating your digestive activities in your GI tract. Okay. One thing that science is becoming increasingly aware of is this community of microorganisms that live in your GI tract, and they manufacture and release molecules that can actually impact the nervous system that's physically located in your GI tract, right? Your small and large intestine. And it can also, these molecules that the bacteria manufacture can also enter the bloodstream, travel up, cross the blood-brain barrier, and also influence the activity in your brain as well. So there's a lot that science is currently learning and figuring out about these topics. Okay, so somatic nervous system has no subdivisions. Autonomic nervous system has the sympathetic, parasympathetic, and enteric branches. Okay, number 3. Please ask questions along the way if you have them. Just type them into the chat window. And if I go too fast, slow me down or unmute your microphone and say, hey, Dr. Allen, what about this? Okay, number 3, back to the somatic nervous system. It's true that the somatic nervous system often, but not always, is under voluntary control. Okay. In other words, you have the ability with your conscious mind to think about something and the body will respond to that. That's voluntary or conscious control. That conscious control is typically centered from the cerebral cortex. Okay, the cerebral cortex, as you may or may not remember from your study time in lab, is sort of the top layer of surface area of the actual brain. Okay, that's what the cerebral cortex actually is. Okay, so the somatic nervous system is often under voluntary control from the cerebral cortex, from basal ganglia, and you remember ganglia are simply collections of cell bodies, from the cerebellum, from the brainstem, and the spinal cord. Okay. Now, in contrast to that, the autonomic nervous system is typically under involuntary control. Typically, you do not have the ability to consciously think about the activities of the autonomic system and modify them in any meaningful way. And this involuntary control is centered from the hypothalamus. Okay, so hopefully these things are making sense to you in terms of the anatomy that you're focusing on for the vocab portion of the lab exam. The limbic system, which is a whole collection of structures. The brainstem, spinal cord, and there is some in the cerebral cortex as well. Okay, so the autonomic system is under involuntary control. Let me highlight that, involuntary control. And the somatic nervous system is under voluntary control. We're going to be giving you examples of these things in just a moment, folks, okay? So what we're doing right now is just whetting your appetite. Okay. Fourth point. The somatic nervous system, for the somatic nervous system, sensory information travels into the central nervous system from the somatic senses. And we have information moving into the central nervous system from the somatic senses. Okay, and then we're going to put those in your notes here, what the somatic senses are. So I'm going to highlight the somatic senses. Okay. When we say somatic senses, we're talking about tactile, the ability to touch, thermal, okay, so that be able to detect heat, pain, okay, whether, when you have a pain sensation, it really indicates that the tissue is being damaged in some way. So when you feel pain, that sensation is your body's warning that there's damage occurring to tissue. And proprioceptive, which is your body's awareness. Is your body's awareness of where its body parts are in three-dimensional space. For example, right now, as you're sitting at home, okay, I bet you that if you think about it, without looking at your foot, I bet you can tell where your right big toe is. Okay, where is your right big toe? Take a moment and think about it. Don't look at it, just feel it. You can feel where your right big toe is. The ability to feel where your right big toe is without looking at it is called proprioception. Okay. Okay, so there's a number of activities here. So we have the somatic senses, and then we also have the special senses. Okay. When we're talking about the special senses, we're talking about things that you're probably familiar with. We're talking about smell, taste, vision, hearing, and your sense of balance or equilibrium. These are referred to as special senses. Okay. So once again, sensory information in regard to the somatic nervous system travels into the central nervous system from the somatic senses and the special senses, okay? And then motor neurons, and then motor neurons send information out to the somatic nervous system to elicit a response, okay? And then motor neurons send information outward to elicit a response, okay? You might be walking along and you momentarily lose your balance, okay? Well, your body's going to try to counteract that so you don't fall over. So when the motor neurons send information to your feet, ankles, and legs to try to adjust your balance, that's part of the response that's taking place. All right. That would be for the somatic nervous system. The comparable idea for the autonomic nervous system is that sensory information travels into the central nervous system from nerve endings that are embedded in internal anatomy of your body, primarily your organs and your blood vessels. Now, these sorts of sensory receptors are given a special name. Let me put a question in the chat window. What kind of sensory receptors provide information about the internal status of your body organs? Do you know what they're called? What kind of sensory receptors provide information about the internal status of your body organs? Do you know what those sensory receptors are called? Okay, I'm gonna type this in very slowly because I want you to think about that. Sensory information travels into the central nervous system from, can you help me put the next word in? For the automatic, okay, Ashley, very good. Interoceptors, that's exactly what I was fishing for. That is correct. Okay, so number 4 here for the autonomic nervous system. Sensory information travels into the central nervous system from interoceptors, okay? And let's take a moment and define that within parentheses. Interoceptors are sensory receptors embedded in blood vessels and viscera, basically your internal organs. Okay. Sensory information travels into the central nervous system from interoceptors and somatic and special senses, and then motor neurons send information out to the autonomic nervous system to elicit a response. Okay. All right. So in many ways, you can think about the somatic nervous system taking care of information that begins at the surface of your body in some way, right? So that you can touch something, or you can feel heat on a stove, or you know you shouldn't touch a sharp object because it would cut you and that would create pain, right? So these things are handled by the somatic nervous system, whereas what the internal status of a blood vessel is in response to blood flow moving through that area is handled by the autonomic nervous system. And if you think about that, that's fairly consistent, right? The autonomic nervous system is under involuntary control. There's nothing you can do to think consciously with your brain to change what a blood vessel is going to be doing. Okay, there's nothing you can do about that. Whereas there might be something you can do to move your hand away from a hot burner on a stove so you don't burn yourself. So that would be under voluntary control. So if you take a moment to think about these things, they do start to make a lot of sense. Okay, questions at this time? Okay. Number 5, continuing with the somatic nervous system. The somatic nervous system only releases the neurotransmitter acetylcholine from the motor neurons. Okay, so motor neurons only release acetylcholine. Okay, so we encountered that when we talked about muscle contraction at the neuromuscular junction, right? Those motor neurons were stimulated by a nerve impulse to release acetylcholine, which then diffused across the synaptic cleft and attached to acetylcholine receptors in motor cells, which then depolarize them to generate a muscle action potential to do all the stuff we've talked about in a previous chapter. So motor neurons only release acetylcholine. That is true for the somatic nervous system. Okay. But within the autonomic nervous system, it gets more complicated. And so I'm going to break it down by neurotransmitter here. Within the somatic nervous system, acetylcholine is released from neurons that are connected to sweat glands. Acetylcholine is released from neurons connected to sweat glands, okay? So when you sweat, folks, you can bet there's some acetylcholine involved. It is also, acetylcholine is also released from all sympathetic and parasympathetic preganglionic neurons. Okay, so that might take a little bit of time to digest. It's released from all sympathetic and parasympathetic. Okay, remember up here we have sympathetic, fight or flight. We have parasympathetic, rest and digest. Okay, so acetylcholine is released from all sympathetic and parasympathetic preganglionic neurons. Okay, it is also released from all parasympathetic postganglionic neurons. Okay, so this is involved stuff, folks, and you really got to take time to process it. It won't come right away. So acetylcholine is released from all parasympathetic postganglionic. Okay, so after a ganglion, postganglionic neurons. Okay. And just so you know, okay, so we're talking about acetylcholine being released from all parasympathetic postganglionic neurons. Okay. Just so you know, most sympathetic postganglionic neurons, they don't release acetylcholine, they actually release norepinephrine. Okay. Most sympathetic postganglionic neurons release norepinephrine. Okay, so that's the notes on acetylcholine, okay? Within the somatic nervous system, motor neurons only release acetylcholine. They don't release anything else. Their gene expression prevents them from doing anything but releasing acetylcholine. But in the autonomic nervous system, acetylcholine is released from different things. It's released from neurons connected to sweat glands. It's released from all the sympathetic, meaning fight or flight, and parasympathetic, meaning rest and digest, preganglionic neurons. Acetylcholine is also released from all parasympathetic postganglionic neurons. Okay, so at the end of this talking point, we mentioned norepinephrine. So let's put a little bullet in here for norepinephrine. Okay, norepinephrine is released by most sympathetic postganglionic neurons. Okay, which we've also said. But it's also released by subsets of cells. For example, it's also released by a subset of cells in the adrenal gland, specifically the adrenal medulla, called chromaffin cells. If you take a look on page 528 of your textbook, figure 15.1, it is the third row of information there, which you see the adrenal gland, and you notice that a subset of cells is highlighted called the chromaffin cells. Okay, chromaffin cells are specialized cells in the adrenal medulla that can release not only norepinephrine, but also epinephrine. So, two molecules that are chemical cousins of each other. So the chromaffin cells of the adrenal medulla release norepinephrine and epinephrine, okay? Now, if you've waded through this chapter already, and I know it is a pretty dense chapter, if you've waded through the chapter, you know that the chapter does introduce you to many of these different neurotransmitters, okay? So, normally if we were in a normal semester, I'd have you memorize a lot of these things, but you're going to have access to them on your final exam because you're going to have your book in front of you in your notes. So, take some comfort in that. All right. Does norepinephrine function as a neurotransmitter? Pam, yes. The answer to your question, Pam, is that many of the molecules that we can typically think of as neurotransmitters function as hormones and vice versa. It just depends on what anatomical location we're talking about. So the answer is yes, Pam. Okay. Other questions? Okay, number six, moving back to the somatic nervous system, okay? Again, it's going to take you a while to weed through this. This is very dense material, so, you're going to have to spend time on it, but be kind to yourself. It won't come overnight. All right, number six, somatic nervous tissue. This tissue, the tissue that responds to the neurotransmitter released from the motor neurons, are skeletal muscle, right? Skeletal muscle is the kind of tissue that responds to the acetylcholine. You already know that. The tissue that responds to neurotransmitter released from the motor neurons is skeletal muscle, okay? In other words, skeletal muscle is the effector, right? E-F-F-E-C-T-O-R. Skeletal muscle is the effector. Okay? So when the somatic nervous system receives some sort of information and then transmit an electrical signal back out for a motor neuron to do something, the effector that responds to that motor neuron is always going to be skeletal muscle cells, always going to be skeletal muscle cells. Within the autonomic nervous system, the tissue that responds to the neurotransmitters released from the motor neurons can be a variety of things. The effector can be smooth muscle around, let's say, a blood vessel, cardiac muscle of your heart, right? So the heart can also be an effector of the autonomic nervous system. And then glands, right? If you're going to sweat, let's say you're walking outside and it's a warm day and you start to sweat under your armpits, okay? The glands are going to be effectors for the autonomic nervous system because you need to sweat in order to cool your body. The tissue that responds to the neurotransmitters in the autonomic nervous system are smooth muscle, okay, cardiac muscle, and glands, right? Sweat glands, glands that produce earwax in your ears, salivary glands. Think about that. I mean, actually, we are going to think about that pretty soon. We're going to go over some examples here. What happens if your body cannot produce sweat? Well, if you can't produce sweat, then Suzette, then you can't cool your body very effectively. Okay, which means you would be at risk, meaning that you would have to avoid certain environments and certain activities. If you truly can't sweat ever, then you're not really going to be able to exercise, right? That would be a very serious circumstance. Was there something more specific you had a question about that, Suzette? Are you aware of somebody that has such a condition? Okay. Um, what kind of lifestyle do they have? What I mean is, what are they allowed to do and not do after having talked with their doctor? Oh my. uh, okay. Thank you for sharing, Suzette. Is it? I'm curious. Are there medical therapies or treatments that have been able to help your cousin? They give her injections. Okay. Do you happen to know what of?
I think she said something along the Botox or something like that. I'm not exactly sure what the injection was, but I know it has. They injected in her armpits and some places around her body for her to even try to produce sweat.
Suzette, thank you for sharing. Do the doctors know why your cousin cannot sweat?
She has some neurological issues, so she, um, so they think that might have triggered why she can't sweat.
So as far as you know, she does have sweat glands, but her nervous system can't stimulate them?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you for sharing. I'm very sorry to hear that, and I hope she will be okay. But yeah, that's pretty serious, right? Because you can't regulate your body temperature. Okay. Um, okay, gang, let's see here. I have one more talking point on this table, then we're going to go into some practical examples here. Okay, number 7. Um, so this is just to complete your notes. For the somatic nervous system being complete here, the effector response is that the skeletal muscle tissue contracts. Okay, the skeletal muscle is the effector, but exactly what does it do? Well, in this case, it contracts, right? Skeletal muscle, skeletal cells, when they are stimulated by the acetylcholine, they will respond by contracting. Within the autonomic nervous system, there's a number of things we have to say. The effector response is contraction or relaxation of the smooth muscle. It would be an increase or decreased rate and force of contraction of the heart muscle. Okay, so increased or decreased rate and force of contraction of cardiac muscle. And then finally, with respect to the glands, it would lead to the effector response could be an increase or decrease of the secretion of the gland, okay, whether it be a sweat gland or an earwax gland, something like this. Okay, so within the somatic nervous system, right, the effector response to acetylcholine is always to stimulate the muscle contraction. So you have a neurotransmitter, acetylcholine, which stimulates contraction. You do not have a neurotransmitter which relaxes muscle contraction. The way you relax the muscle contraction is simply to not stimulate. If you see the difference there. To stimulate muscle contraction, you have a neurotransmitter, acetylcholine. But to relax that muscle, there's no separate neurotransmitter. To relax it, you simply take away the acetylcholine. For the effector responses, though, because there's two different categories of neurotransmitter, acetylcholine and norepinephrine, okay, we can actually have two different hormones that promote a stimulation or relaxation response. So contraction or relaxation of the smooth muscle, increase or decrease rate of cardiac muscle contraction, and increase or decrease secretions of the glands. All right, gang, that completes our note-taking for this table, and it's just a way to begin to summarize information that is in this chapter. You're going to have to spend some time thinking about this on your own. But let me ask a series of questions here in your notes. Okay. How can the same neurotransmitter produce different responses, okay, in either stimulation or relaxation response? Okay, this is coming off number 7 here for the autonomic nervous system. We said, right, the effector response can be contraction or relaxation. That means stimulation or relaxation. How can the same neurotransmitter produce different responses, such as stimulation or relaxation, at different locations within the body? Folks, what's the answer to that? Please type the answer into the chat window if you know the answer to that. How can the same neurotransmitter produce different responses at different locations within the body? For those that may have had 111, one of the questions, for those that may have had biology 111, I asked a similar question in the endocrine system. How can the same hormone produce a different response at different locations of the body? Same answer here. How can the same neurotransmitter produce different responses at different locations within the body? What do you think, folks? How can the same substance, okay, Pam, so Pam, you say they, I assume you mean neurotransmitters, may have a different action at a different location. That's correct, they do. How's that possible? Lindsay, does it depend on the channels on the cell membrane? Well, I think you're very close to it, Lindsay. So can you rephrase your statement a different way? What are these channels you're talking about? Okay. Well, that's true. I mean, we need ion channels to potentially depolarize or hyperpolarize, right? If we depolarize, we're going to stimulate. If we hyperpolarize, we're going to relax. Okay. Lindsay, I think you basically have it. You're just not using the language I need from you. Well, no, not voltage-gated ion channels. These are ligand-gated channels. Okay. I think you have it. I mean, I think collectively we kind of have it on the chat window, but let's be sure we really have it. Okay. How can the same neurotransmitter produce different responses at different locations within the body? It's due to the presence of different receptors that bind the same neurotransmitter. So different acetylcholine receptors are present at different locations. For example, within your skeletal muscle cells, the skeletal muscle cells of your arm, right, your biceps brachii, the plasma membrane of your biceps brachii skeletal muscle cells have a certain form of acetylcholine receptor that binds acetylcholine. And when acetylcholine binds those receptors, the skeletal muscle cells are activated to contract. They're stimulated. But if you've been reading your textbook carefully, there are actually neurons in the brain that have acetylcholine receptors on them, that when acetylcholine is released and the acetylcholine binds to those receptors in your brain, it actually relaxes those neurons. And that's part of what has to take place when you start to relax at nighttime as you're getting ready to fall asleep. Okay, so we'll be looking at this, gang, but the quick answer is that there are different receptors at different locations of the body that bind the same neurotransmitter. Because the receptors are different, not the neurotransmitter, because the receptors are different, they respond in a different fashion to the same neurotransmitter. Okay, folks, does that make sense at this time? Is that working for you? Okay. Okay, are you okay, folks? I need feedback from you. All right. Okay, please let me know if you're struggling with this. Please let me know. So I need to try to communicate it differently to you if you're struggling. Okay. All right. So let's get a couple more questions into your notes here. Okay. First, what is a ganglion? I'm going to answer that right away so we can move on here. Okay. A ganglion is a group of neuron cell bodies that lies outside the central nervous system. And this is where we get into these really messy diagrams on page 530 and 531. Okay. Folks, do not even attempt to memorize that. I have no interest in you memorizing it. Okay. But I do expect you to potentially be able to answer a question or two about it. So figure 15.2 and 15.3 is what I'm trying to get you to look at this time. So the question is, what is a ganglion? A group of neuronal cell bodies lying outside the central nervous system. Okay, so I'm specifically thinking about figures 15.2 and 15.3. Okay, and so probably the more important question at this point, okay, I guess I should number these here. Question 1, which we answered. Question 2, question 3. The third question is, well, what is the purpose of a ganglion? Okay, I'm looking at our time, gang, and I know what I want to accomplish with you here today, so I'm going to continue to answer some of these questions. Although if you're able to answer them, that's fantastic, okay? So what is the purpose of a ganglion? The purpose, folks, is to allow information from a single presynaptic neuron to be simultaneously spread or transmitted to multiple postsynaptic neurons that then potentially travel to multiple tissues and organs. It's like, think about it. Right now, you have one person me talking. I'm talking, but I can impact all of you sitting online. Every one of you can hear me in a sense that, it's almost like I'm a single presynaptic neuron, and the message of my voice is being spread out to multiple different locations through you. Okay? All right, the purpose is to allow information from a single presynaptic neuron to be simultaneously. I see your question, Lindsay, just a moment. To allow information from a single presynaptic neuron to be simultaneously spread to multiple postsynaptic neurons traveling to multiple tissues and organs, right? I mean, it might be the case, it really might be the case that you want information to travel to multiple destinations because there has to be multiple things that occur at the same time. I will be giving you some examples of that in just a moment. Okay, so the question in your notes is, what is the purpose of a ganglion? To allow information from a single presynaptic neuron to be simultaneously spread to multiple postsynaptic neurons traveling to multiple tissues and organs. Lindsay, I haven't forgotten about you. Let's think about that a different way. I hope, since we are in time of the coronavirus, think about it this way. If you had a single person that was infected with coronavirus and they were actively shedding the virus every time they coughed or sneezed, if that person showed up at Grand Central Station in New York City, that single person, that single presynaptic neuron, could then simultaneously spread that virus to multiple people that will get on different trains that leave Grand Central Station to go to different locations within the city, right? So that's really the purpose of the ganglion, is to allow a single communication event to then be transmitted to different destinations. Okay, Lindsay, is a ganglion cyst just an overaccumulation of nerves? Well, a ganglion cyst is an overaccumulation of neuronal cell bodies, but what makes it a cyst is typically you also have an accumulation of fluid that occurs in that location as well. And that's almost always caused by microorganisms like bacteria that got into that location and are starting an inflammatory process. Okay. Other questions? All right. Please ask, folks. I'll try my best. I'm not going to intentionally ignore you, okay? Next question, and then we can start making some sense of all this new information, or at least try to make some sense of it, okay? What is an autonomic plexus? Okay, we have ganglions, which are groups of cell bodies, and that's shown to you in figure 15.2 and 15.3. But when we talk about an autonomic plexus, what the heck are we talking about? Well, gang, the autonomic plexuses that your book has pictures on are shown to you on figure 15.5, page 534. Okay, so a ganglion is a group of cell bodies. A ganglion is a group of cell bodies, but a plexus is a network of axons, okay? So that's a quick way that you can tell them apart. A ganglion is a group of cell bodies. A plexus is a network of axons. Now, of course, the axons are connected to cell bodies at some point, But when we say autonomic plexus, we're talking about a spider web of threads, of axons from the sympathetic and parasympathetic neurons, okay? And quite frankly, they're very often associated near major arteries of your body. Okay, so question 4, what is an autonomic plexus? The quick answer to that is it is a network of axons from sympathetic, okay, fight or flight, and parasympathetic, rest and digest, neurons that are often positioned near major arteries. Okay, and so for that, I'm highlighting figure 15.5 on page 534. Okay, gang. So we have a lot of information into your notes at this time. I mean, look at that. We just put 50 minutes and I've made it onto the second page. Holy crap. All right, so there's a lot of dense content here. Okay, let's see if we can take some of this basic information now and give you some practical examples of how this kind of works in your body. So that's what I want to do with you next. Practical example, here's the topic we're going to be talking about. How does your body respond when you are scared? Okay, we're going to think about this and try to inject our new knowledge and information that's in this chapter. Okay, well, you appreciate when you're scared, your body responds by getting ready for the fight or flight response, right? So we're going to be thinking a lot about the sympathetic nervous system at this time. Okay. When you're scared, your body gets ready for this fight or flight, okay? So what I want to do now at this point is list some of the things that actually happen to your body as a result of this fight or flight mechanism, okay? So we're going to list down some physiology changes that happen during fight or flight, okay? And, you know, to be honest with you, the changes that your body experiences during fight or flight is due to a combination of not just nervous system activation, but also hormonal release from the endocrine system. But keep in mind that in almost all scenarios, you know, the endocrine tissue, which contains endocrine glands, which release hormones, those hormones are getting released because they are that glandular tissue is being stimulated by the nervous system. Okay, so physiology changes that happen during fight or flight include a combination of nervous system activation and hormonal release from the endocrine tissue. All right. So I bet you can think, you tell me in the chat window, how does your body respond when you get scared? What happens? Your hair, okay, all right, okay, good. So you get the goose pimples, right? Okay, so you get goosebumps. Okay, what else? Anything else? I mean, there's lots of things I'm going to put in your notes, but I'll be happy to put in things that you're thinking about. Okay, you get an adrenaline rush, no doubt about that. Okay, heart rate increases, you sweat, no question about these things. Very good, very good. All right. Muscle tension, absolutely, right? I mean, I don't know about you, but usually the back of my neck gets very, very tight. Blood pressure probably goes up because you're getting ready to fight, right? Or to run away. Okay, so in other words, we don't want the blood pressure to be so low that you pass out. Okay. All right, so very good stuff here. Let me put some of this down. Heart rate increases. Right, you might shake. That's right. You might shake. Okay, if you're really, really scared, you might in fact shake. Okay, blood pressure. Okay, very good, folks. Very, very good. Let me put a couple others in here. All right. Typically, not only will your heart rate will go up, but your breathing rate will also increase, right? Breathing rate goes up. I'm just looking at my notes here. Okay. Blood vessels around your major organs, heart, kidneys, livers, those blood vessels actually dilate because we want plenty of blood to get to them in order so that they can function properly during this threat. Okay. Central blood vessels around major organs dilate. Okay. Your blood glucose level goes up. In other words, cells start to spit glucose into the bloodstream. And the reason for that is to be sure that there's plenty of sugar around as a biochemical fuel to power muscle contraction. Let's see, what else here? Let's see, blood calcium levels spike. Okay, blood calcium levels will spike. Let's see. There's also an increase in white blood cell numbers because your body, when your body feels threatened, typically part of that threat, might be an infectious threat. It might be an infectious threat, so that you need your immune system to ramp up its activity. So the white blood cell number will typically go up. Okay, so I think we've certainly hit, if not all of them, then many of the things, okay, many of the things that happen during fight or flight. So here's the scenario that I want you to consider. Okay, here's the scenario, all right. Let's say that you go to one of those 4D. Have you ever been to a 4D movie? One of those movies that you go in and you wear those funny looking glasses so you get a sense of depth to the video. So when the dinosaur is moving towards you, it really looks like he's coming right at you. And also, you're sitting in special chairs where they blow puffs of air on the back of your neck, or there's little streams of water that shoot out and spray you with water and things like that. That's what I mean by a 4D movie. Let's say you go to a 4D movie that's scary. Let's say you go to a 4D scary movie where they blow cool air on you and spray gross odors on you while showing you creepy images and creepy sounds. Okay. All right. All right. So this could obviously be any scary scenario. Maybe it could be what the last time you went to Jason's Woods at Halloween to scare yourself to death. Okay. Doesn't matter what a scary circumstance that you're in. That's the scenario we need to think about. Okay. Input. Okay. The sensory nervous system. All right. So let's think about this. Your eyes. Obviously, part of being afraid is the fact that you are aware of your surroundings, right? You are seeing someone dressed in a Halloween costume or something moving towards you. So your eyes are part of your sensory nervous system. They're part of the special senses, right? They're going to send nerve impulses from the retina of your eyeball to the occipital lobe of your cerebral cortex. Okay. Your eyes, which are the special senses, part of the special senses, deliver information via nerve impulses from the retina to the brain, specifically the occipital lobe of the cerebral cortex. Okay. And since we're talking about vision information, right, from the retina, that's going to travel along the optic nerve, which you know from your lab homework that you're all doing at home, is actually called cranial nerve number 2. Okay. Okay. So you see some scary guy coming towards you with a plastic knife. Okay. That scares you. So information from your eyes, the retina, which is where the optic nerve is connected to, transmits information along that optic nerve into the cerebral cortex of your body, and you get scared. Okay, so there's a lot going on here. Number 2, your ears. Okay, that person or dinosaur on the screen, on the screen in the 4D movie, well, it's roaring at you in a blood-curdling roar, so you can hear that. So that would also be part of the sensory nervous system. Your ears, which are also special senses, deliver information from the cochlea, okay, of your inner ear, to the brain. And specifically in the brain, it's going to go to the temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex. And that's going to be cranial nerve. Does anybody know which cranial nerve that is? Does anybody know the number or the name? When you have a sensation of hearing, when your eardrum vibrates and information is transmitted into the cochlea, and then the cochlea converts that sound into an electrical impulse. What's the name of the nerve that carries it into the brain? Does anybody know? These are the sorts of things that, if we had some real lab time together, we'd be spending some time talking about. Okay, and the name of the nerve is the vestibulocochlear nerve, and it's cranial nerve number 8. Okay. The vestibulocochlear, let me fix the spelling here. Cranial nerve 8. Okay, but you get the idea of what we're talking about, right? You are experiencing some kind of scary stimulus, both visual that you detect with your eyes and sound that you detect with your ears. Okay. Number 3. Okay, we mentioned that the scenario is that you're in this 4D theater and they're spraying these gross odors around. Okay, even though I'm misspelling everything here. These gross odors you're going to pick up with your olfactory sensors in the nose. Okay, so you have your nose here, part of the special senses, which delivers information from the nasal cavity to the brain, and specifically the temporal lobe of the cerebral cortex. Okay. Notice how the ears go to the temporal lobe, and so does the nose. Via the olfactory nerve, which you may know from your homework is cranial nerve number 1. Okay. All right. So, all right, your eyes are detecting things that are scary. Your ears are detecting things that are scary. Your nose is detecting gross things, which are part of the scary experience. And then on top of that, if we go back to our 4D scary movie scenario, you're feeling puffs of air on the back of your neck. Well, the puffs of air, I'm gonna say it's cold air. Say puffs of cold air on the back of your neck. That's going to be detected by thermoreceptors that are present in your skin. Okay. So we have thermoreceptors embedded in your skin, which detect cold air on the back of your neck. Okay. Now, so you're detecting cold air on the back of your neck. All right. And not only are you detecting that the air is cold, but you can sense the motion of the hair on the back of your neck because of your hair follicles moving. Okay, your hair follicles are moving because the cold air is bumping up against the hair follicles. Okay, so the nerve endings around the hair follicles, you might recall from our time in the skin chapter, are called hair root plexuses. Okay, a hair root plexus is a sensory receptor embedded around the hair follicle. So, hair root plexuses detect the motion of hair follicles caused by the air hitting the back of your neck, okay? So we have additional sensory information going into your central nervous system. We have the thermoreceptors detecting the coolness of the air, right? And we have the hair root plexuses detecting the motion of your hair follicles, okay? So all of this information is being sent into your central nervous system. You see a scary video, you see a scary dinosaur or person dressed in a Halloween costume. You hear eerie sounds of Halloween. There's gross odors in the atmosphere, so, like the stench of rotten eggs. You feel the cold air on the back of your neck. You feel the temperature of the air and you feel the motion of the air because your hair follicles are moving. This is setting up for a very scary circumstance for us. All this information is being transmitted by the sensory nervous system into the central nervous system. Okay? You start thinking about it, it's like, you know, it's kind of insane that we actually pay people to scare us, right? I mean, it's kind of silly. All right. Let's continue. Next, we have what's called integration. Okay, so up here, right, we have the input. Next, we have the integration. Okay, so the input is the sensory nervous system. What's happening at the surface of your body? What's happening at the surface of your body? Then we have integration. Well, what is your brain and spinal cord, but primarily the brain? What's it going to do with this information? What's it going to think? Okay. Okay, so we have integration, the central nervous system. All right. Let's continue here. Okay, we're almost out of time. Okay. Let me get one thing into your notes. Okay. There are going to be networks, okay, groups, networks of neurons which communicate with each other through interneurons. Interneurons, okay? Interneurons are the neurons that are connected in between the sensory neurons and the motor neurons, okay? So there's going to be networks of neurons that communicate with each other through interneurons. Okay, the interneurons, they act as bridges between one region of the central nervous system and another region. Okay. All right. Okay, gang. Folks, we're out of time. So what we will do is continue our walk through chapter 15 on Wednesday. Okay, we're going to continue with our scary scenario here at the start of class on Wednesday, because we need to talk about what actually happens in the central nervous system and how your body responds to that. So we have a considerable amount of note-taking yet to do on this topic. So do you have any questions before we take a break? Okay. All right, gang. Then let's take a 15-minute break. Are we going to have practice for the lab exam on Wednesday? Yes, I can do that for you. I can give you, for those that stick around today, I can give you practice today and on Wednesday. It'll be the same questions, either Monday or Wednesday, whichever sessions you go to, but I can give you some practice on that, yes. As well as give you answers to homework today. Anything else? Okay. All right, gang. I'm going to stop sharing and take a quick 15-minute break. I will be back with you at 9:32-ish. and I'll be happy to go over lab homework and also give you a small practice quiz for the upcoming lab exam. Okay, so I will see you in about 15 minutes. If you decide not to hang on, then please stay safe, and I'll see you on Wednesday.
Is it just chapters 20 and 21 that we're doing?
Okay, folks, can you hear me okay? All right, sorry about that. Let me start again here. We're going to go over lab exercises 18 and 20. And so let's begin on page 293. Letter A, the connective tissue coverings. Okay, page 293. Letter A, number 1, is the endoneurium. Number 2 is the peri, P-E-R-I, perineurium. Number 3 is the epineurium. Okay. Section B, the rami of the spinal nerves. Number 1 is the posterior ramus. Number 2 is the rami communicantes. Rami communicantes. 3 is the anterior ramus. The anterior ramus. We're on lab number 18, Jennifer, page 293. Okay, before I go any further, do you need any part of sections A or B repeated? Okay, A, very good. Okay, page 293, once again, letter A for the second time. Letter A is endoneurium. Number 1 is endoneurium. Number 2 is perineurium. And 3 is epineurium. So once again, 1 is endoneurium, 2 perineurium, 3 epineurium. All right. Letter C, the major nerves of the nerve plexuses. C, number 1 is lumbar. Number 1 is lumbar. 2 is sacral. 3 is cervical. 4 is brachial. 5 is also brachial. 6 is sacral. 7 is lumbar. 8 is brachial. 9 is sacral. And 10 is sacral. Okay. Would you like any of section C repeated? Okay. Moving to letter D, where we identify the spinal nerves. Number 1 is tibial, T-I-B-I-A-L, tibial. 2 is the common fibular, also called the perineal. Number 3, there are 31 pairs of spinal nerves. Number 4, that is the sciatic nerve. Number 5 is 1, O-N-E, 1. Number 5 is 1. Number 6 is motor and sensory. Motor and sensory. Number 7 is 12. There are 12 pairs of thoracic nerves. Number 8 is femoral. Number 9 is 5. There are 5 sacral nerves. Number 10, there are 5 lumbar nerves. Number 11 is motor and sensory. 11 is motor and sensory. 12, there are 8 pairs of cervical nerves. 8 pairs of cervical nerves. 13 is axillary. 14 is radial. 15 is musculocutaneous. Musculocutaneous is the answer to 15. 16 is the phrenic nerve. 17 is the ulna nerve. 18 is the median nerve. Okay, gals, do you need any of letter D repeated?
Number 12.
Okay. Number 12 is 8. There are 8 pairs of cervical nerves. Okay, anything else? Okay, page 295, letter E, the anatomy review. Number 1 is the epineurium. 2 is the spinal nerve. 3 is the perineurium. 4 is fascicle. 5 is the endoneurium. And 6 is an axon. 6 is axon. Okay, let's take a look at figure 18.8. Excuse me. Number 1, figure 18.8. Number 1 is the axillary nerve. 2 is the musculocutaneous nerve. 3, sorry, allergies here. 3 is median. 4 is radial. 5 is the ulnar, right? The ulnar nerve. And 6 is phrenic. 6 is the phrenic nerve. Okay. Let's go to page 296, and you have figure 18.9 there. Number 1 is the obturator nerve. 2 is the pudendal nerve. That's P-U-D-E-N-D-A-L, pudendal nerve. 3 is the femoral nerve. 4 is the sciatic nerve. 5 is the tibial nerve. And 6 is the common fibular nerve. Common fibular. Okay. Gals, do you need any of figure 18.8 or 18.9 repeated?
What was number 4 for 18.9?
Number 4 is the sciatic nerve. Number 4 is sciatic. Okay, anything else? Okay, let's go to using your knowledge on page 297. Okay, so we got to identify the correct nerve. All right, for number 1, that would be the median nerve. For number 2, that would be the radial nerve. For number 3, that would be the sciatic nerve. For number 4, okay, where you impact your hand, that would be the ulnar nerve. For number 5, if the question asks, where is the spinal cord injury? That would be at vertebra C8. C8. Number 6 is the obturator nerve. Number 7 is the common fibular nerve. Then as we finish 8 through 10, number 8 is the sciatic nerve. 9 is the axillary nerve. And 10, if you have a splinter, well, that's going to be the ulnar nerve. Okay. All right, and that does it for exercise 18. Do you have any questions that you need repeated for using your knowledge?
Number 7.
Okay. I'll do 7 and 8. Number 7 is the common fibular nerve. Common fibular nerve is 7. And number 8 is the sciatic nerve. Okay. Let's take a look at lab exercise 20. All right, lab exercise 20, reviewing your knowledge, page 327. Okay, here we go. Page 327, section A for brain structure. Number 1 is the thalamus. 2 is the hypothalamus. 3 is the pineal gland. 4 is the diencephalon. 5 is the midbrain. 6 is the pons, P-O-N-S. 7 is the medulla oblongata. 8 is brainstem. 9 cerebellum. 10 spinal cord. 11 cerebrum. And 12 the pituitary gland. Anything you need repeated on that first group of 12? Okay. Did you have something, Suzette?
You said 12 was pituitary?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, let's go to picture B. Picture B. Number 13 is the cerebrum. 14 is the olfactory bulb. 15 is the olfactory tract. 15 is olfactory tract. 16 is the pituitary gland. 17 is the optic tract. 18 is the cerebral peduncle of the midbrain. The cerebral peduncle of the midbrain. 19 is pons. 20 is the medulla oblongata. 21 is the spinal cord, and 22 is the cerebellum. Okay. Moving to part B on page 328. Part B on page 328. Okay, we need to give the brain region for the functions that are described in each statement. Number 1 would be the medulla oblongata. Number 2, the cerebellum. 3, the pineal gland. 4, the hypothalamus. 5 is the cerebral cortex. 6 is the pons. 7 is the thalamus. 8 is the corpora quadrigemina, corpora quadrigemina of the midbrain. That's a mouthful. 9 is the basal nuclei, and 10 is the corpus callosum. Do you need any of that repeated? Okay, let's go to letter C, where you have to fill in the numbered blanks. The topic is the flow of the cerebrospinal fluid. Number 1 is the choroid plexus. 2, the lateral ventricles. 3, the third ventricle. 4, fourth ventricle. 5, epidermal cells. 6, the septum pellucidum. 7 is the third ventricle. 8 is the cerebral aqueduct. 9 is subarachnoid. 10 is central canal. 11 is subarachnoid. Okay, there's 2 more there, 12 and 13. One moment. 12 is the arachnoid villi, and 13 is the superior sagittal sinus. Okay, do you need any from part C repeated?
Number 1.
Number 1 is the choroid plexus, Anything else? Okay, let's go to using your knowledge on page 329. Using your knowledge, page 329. All right, letter A. Number one is the corpus callosum. Number 2 is the thalamus. 3 is the midbrain. 4 is the cerebellum. 5 is the pons. Okay, going to section B on page 330. Number 6. Number 6 is the Faix cerebri. That's Faix cerebri, the Faix cerebri. Number 7 is the corpus callosum. Number 8 is the lateral ventricle. Number 9 is the septum pellucidum. Number 10 is the choroid plexus. All right, gang. Do you need any of part B repeated? Okay, let's go to section C, the sagittal section of the human brain. C, number 11, is the lateral ventricle. Number 12 is the tentorium cerebelli, the tentorium cerebelli. 13 is the cerebellar peduncle. Number 13 is the cerebellar peduncle. Number 14 is the dura mater. Number 15 is the corpus callosum. Do you need any of part C repeated?
What was number 12?
Number 12 is the tentorium, that's Tentorium, tentorium cerebelli, cerebelli. All right, then we have page 332 talking about brain injury. Okay. 16 is going to be letter D. You're going to have a loss of vision. 17 is B. You're going to have a loss of equilibrium. 18 is A. There's going to be a cessation of breathing. 19 is E. You're going to have a loss of pain localization in the shoulder. And 20 is C. You're going to have the loss of your left arm. You're not going to be able to use it. Okay. Suzette, do you need any of that repeated?
No, sir, I am good.
Okay. All right. All right, Suzette, would you like to have a practice quiz today?
Sure.
Okay. All right, just a moment while I get situated for you here. Hold on one second. I have to do a few things on my computer, but I'll be with you in just a moment.
Okay. So are we not doing exercise 21 then?
It is assigned, but it wasn't assigned to be due today.
Oh, okay.
It's assigned to be due actually next week when you are ready to take your lab exam. So let's see here. Okay, let me see here. I am ready to give you your test. Let me see here. Okay, you all set? What I'll do is I'll show you 4 practice images and I'll give you 45 seconds for each one of them. Okay. All right, Suzette, for the very first one, please identify this structure coming up right here. Okay. Okay, please begin. Okay, that's your first image. Let me go to the second image. The second image, please identify this structure. There you go, second image. Okay, that's 45 seconds. Moving on to the third practice image. Please identify this structure. Go ahead. That is 45 seconds. Let's go to the final practice question, which is this image. Okay, that's 45 seconds. Go ahead. Question 4.
Quick question. Is it pointing to the blue?
Yes.
Okay.
It's pointing to where the green arrow is, it's pointing to this blue fiber. Okay, that's 45 seconds. Okay, so let's see. For question 1, which was this image, do you have any idea what that was?
Is it the thalamus?
No, the thalamus would be up in this area. This here is the amygdala. The amygdala. Okay. Well, let's try the second one. How about the second one? The second one here. Any ideas? Okay, well, this is the area of the brain called the fornix, F-O-R-N-I-X, the fornix. The third practice question is here. We're looking at a layer of the eyeball. How about this one, Suzette?
I didn't get that one.
Okay, so
I completely blanked.
that's okay. So you know that the outer layer of white is called the sclera. So the next layer of tissue that's deep to the sclera, that's immediately inside the eye, is actually called the choroid, C-H-O-R-O-I-D, the choroid layer. And then the last question that you were asking me about, that blue fiber. Any thoughts on that? Do you notice what this hole is that that fiber's running into? Do you see that?
Yeah, it's your sphenoid bone, right?
Well, yes. That hole, remember, is your internal auditory meatus.
Okay.
Okay. And that fiber is actually the fiber for your ears. That's the vestibulocochlear nerve.
Okay.
That's one of them that we were talking about in lecture, right? When you hear the scary sounds at the movie theater. That's the nerve that carries sound information from your ears up into your brain. Okay. So I know that's pretty tough. I'm kind of thinking that this is going to be a challenging test for many folks. Okay. So, is there anything